It says I'm already live now. Okay.
All right, we good now?
Yes. Now we're good. Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry about that. I don't know. Very weird.
No, the other day I was on the Good Morning Crypto show, and we did like 15 minutes before we realized we weren't live. So at least this was quicker than that experience.
Appreciate you, Max. Always good looking out. There we go. There's some more people in the chat here.
Yeah. Good morning, DFEN, and good morning, USMC. Hope you guys are doing well. And I'll pitch some questions on my side too if they come in, but feel free to lead them off.
Yeah, that'll be great. I had one here. Well, in the title of this deal, Max was nice enough to list Mt. Gox. So that's what everybody is speculating is driving down, the price of Bitcoin and the entire market here. What do you think, man? Do you think this is just like fear mongering, or do you think people are actually dumping, or what's going on?
Mt. Gox is a tricky situation because we've seen Mt. Gox be something for so long and never actually end up being something. As far as I've heard so far, and a lot of the reporting around this hasn't been necessarily exact, or just been a lot of speculation on it, but it seems to me like most of the Mt. Gox repayment isn't going to be done in full either way. It's going to be partial repayment. So I don't think it's actually going to be something that causes large liquidations from the selling itself. I think it's more going to be the fear around it and people kind of trying to anticipate it and putting out articles and trying to FUD the market. But this has been something that's kind of been a fear catalyst for as long as I've been in crypto. I remember when I first got in crypto, everyone talked about Mt. Gox, and I was like, what is this Mt. Gox thing? So I would be surprised if most of it wasn't already priced into the market at this point. Obviously, when it finally starts happening and there is some selling, I can see it having some impact, but it's not something that I'm necessarily overly concerned about. It's really a short-term liquidation event that doesn't really change any of the fundamental theses behind these assets. What's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a narrative with the dump, right? Like, not anything new. And I've been saying this for a while. Like, I still think the top for Bitcoin is either already in or it goes back to 75 and it's done. Which I don't hear anybody else saying. Everybody else is like foregone conclusion, 100K plus. It's like out of the question that it would be done with the run. Chad Steinberg and a lot of other people, super bulls, and I hope they're right. I hope people make a ton of money. We have clients that hold a lot of Bitcoin, so I want them to do well. Same thing for Ethereum, same thing for the rest of the market. I just have my own thesis, right? So, but yeah, Mt. Gox, I do think that there could be some selling pressure. If they do start making that, apparently they've made some of the repayments, and a lot of people are kind of front running that. I think that maybe has caused some of the liquidations. You've also seen Germany supposedly liquidating their, holdings from their government. Not OT.
Jake, I lost your audio. I don't know if that's just on my side. Let's see if the chat is saying anything. See if the chat. Chat, can you still hear Jake, or is that just a me thing? Apologize for the technical difficulties tonight. We'll get it rolling in a second. Let me know in the chat if you guys can hear Jake, or that's just me.
Can y'all hear me, or is it?
Of course you can hear him. All right,
okay, cool.
Let me figure this out real quick.
All right,
Jake, keep going on some questions. I'll see what's going on my end.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think that we probably could see some more downside, in the market before we have the rise back to 75. But that's my consensus on it. I think we're a lot further along in this cycle than people anticipate, but I do still think we've got an altcoin season. You and I talked about this the other day, and I don't know if you can hear me yet or not, but the S&P and the NASDAQ both have reached a full extension in comparison to the drawdown in 2008 and the GFC. And so both of those, have seen expansion while the Russell 2000 low or small cap, stocks haven't really expanded the same way. There's been a consolidation to like the top 10 stocks in both those indexes. And so because of that, I think that there's likely a scenario where, if we do see some of this international debt dumped on the market, you could have people rotate out of those consolidated positions in the top end of the stock market down into these other, like stuff that's in the Russell 2000. Because if you can't go to risk off, a lot of people, gold and silver, it's a big play. People are excited about that, and I put my thoughts about that out on Twitter the other day and caught a lot of flack. But I think that there could be definitely a rotation from those positions into other opportunities. If you can't go full risk off because treasuries are a potential problem and bonds are a potential problem, then you're going to look for alpha somewhere else, and you would see that go to the altcoins, and you would see it in small cap stocks also. So it's just kind of what I anticipate playing out. I do think that you're going to see a significant drawdown in the S&P and also the NASDAQ, but I think those will be short-lived. I think it'll be a kind of a flash crash situation on those, black swan type event if we do get something. And then a liquidity crisis, everybody's kind of anticipating that. And so if that's what ends up shaking out, then I think they'll rebound quickly. And if you have a longer time horizon, then that's not a big deal. But if you you don't have that long time horizon, then you're going to be looking to get into something that produces stable income and holds its value over the long term while keeping up with inflation. And, it's some of the stuff that we're going to offer through the RIA, kind of creating some annuitized models with stable coins and other revenue producing assets that you can stake and earn a yield on. Really good diversification in that model that we built out there. So, Mikkel, I see that you've repositioned yourself.
I had to go onto my laptop. I'm not sure exactly what was going on, but hopefully we'll be able to keep the show going. A little bit of a weird view here, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I was just giving people a rundown on my macro thesis and how I thought there'd be a rotation from large cap stocks in the S&P and NASDAQ into low cap stocks in the Russell and altcoins if there is trouble in the treasury market.
Yeah, I could definitely see a scenario like that taking place. One of the things that I definitely think is kind of overdue at this point is some kind of change in Federal Reserve policy. That's kind of been being forecasted by a lot of other countries all over the world. We saw Canada, they started rate cuts, as well as the ECB. They've been talking about it as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of change in the rate environment is the catalyst to start maybe making a rotation in how some of the big institutions are investing here. It seems like right now, most of the rally we've seen has been very concentrated into the top equities in the market. And I think that's a lot of fear from big institutions on not wanting to invest in some of the more risky plays out there. I say it like that because obviously there's probably more risk in the thing everyone's been running to as of recently. And I say that as someone who holds a large position in NVIDIA and some of the top tech stocks. So I think it's important to realize that I hold some of those stocks. I understand there's been a concentration there, but I think ultimately we do kind of see things balance out. And I would agree with your thesis there that we do kind of rotate down into some of the smaller cap things or high risk according to the big institutions.
Yeah, and I was, before you hop back in here, I was talking about people's time horizon, right? So if you're closer to retirement, might be a better time to de-risk from those types of positions. Whereas, if you're like Mikkel or myself and plan to continue working for an extended period of time, then you're probably okay to just continue holding those positions and not have to deal with, selling or the tax implications that might be imposed there if you were to, rebalance your portfolio. So, got some other questions here in the chat. I don't know what you have on your side. But
I'm restarting that at the
okay,
moment. I had to switch over to my other computer, so I will
you're good.
have questions on my side in just a second here.
You're good. I got one. This gentleman's asked. He's got a threefold question. He says, "What do you say about the following things? UBI for one. Two, is CBDC a bad thing? And then three, nightmares coming up with a lot of job loss to AI replacing people in the workplace." I mean, I'll put it up here for you guys so you can read it. I've consolidated that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll touch on one real quick.
Yeah.
The CBDC one is something that I've kind of made some. I know the obvious take is right, like CBDCs are bad, like I hate CBDCs, but I kind of want to take just like a contrarian take here, just because I think it's interesting to do so. And that's that, like, obviously, like, CBDCs can be dystopian, and there can be like China's CBDC. I think there's some obvious like concerns about like freedom there, but I also think like a CBDC and digital cash is like inevitable. Like people like my age, like no one wants to carry cash around anymore, and it's almost like an annoyance when you go somewhere and they're like, I only take cash, and you're sitting there like, all right, well, I don't have cash on me now. I have to go to an ATM. So like, I think to a certain degree, I think we should focus on advocating for like a CBDC that does have the proper freedoms in place and things that a government really can't take over and manipulate. And I know that sounds like something that's like crazy right now, but I really do think it's possible that we can move towards a world where we have that. On the XX network, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that token. The founder is David Chong, and he was one of the first people working on the Bitcoin network. And he's built a completely private CBDC for Switzerland that's been tested. And I just think that's a great example, right, of like advocating for the proper type of CBDC rather than taking this whole anti-CBDC stance right off rip. I think we're likely going to see a form of digital money in the future, but as long as it's not forced upon people and people can like openly accept it and know the rules of the platform and not worry about their money being debased or stolen or being forced to be spent in a certain way, I think it can be done in a way that is beneficial to society. And I think if we spend our time like advocating on a CBDC that's actually going to be helpful to us rather than harmful, I think that could be a big benefit. So while I do understand the concerns around CBDCs, and I do understand why for a lot of people it's something that definitely triggers a bad response, I do think it can be done in a right way, and I would like to see more people advocating for it done in that right way.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar boat to you. I think that there's a way that it can be done where it's beneficial, and it provides some type of stable income for people that, you know. So like these three things that he mentioned here are all in a thesis that I actually kind of have put together, and it's probably on a little bit on the dystopian side, but I'll go ahead and give it to you. It's, however, just take it with a grain of salt. That's the way I'm going to put it out, right? So kind of like Mickle, I'm going to take a contrarian view here. I think UBI is coming. It's definitely going to be used in Canada and other places in the world. I don't know that we'll get it here in the US, but we definitely could. And I'll explain how that can work. So if you did have a CBDC or programmable money, you could allocate those resources appropriately if you had an AI that could analyze all the transactions across an economy. So the reason that, socialism and communism and the Soviet Union failed in the USSR was they weren't able to allocate resources appropriately. There's discrepancies that happen in an economy, and in a free market, people see those, and then it's an opportunity. They'll fill the gaps, basically. That doesn't happen in a socialistic society where everybody gets paid the same, and then the government is the only one allocating the resources. But if you had an AI that could analyze all the transactions across an economy, see those discrepancies, and then incentivize spending in those portions of the economy to rectify those deficits, or maybe there's too much spending in a certain sector and it could disincentivize people, to spend their money there, then it actually helps revert things to the mean so that you don't have these boom bust cycles, which, you make a bunch of money in a boom cycle, but if you're retiring in 09, like you lost your shirt, right? So timing is everything. But if you had AI and all of these other converging technologies that are, just on the cusp of being used at scale to reduce the cost of production for things, if you got 3D printing, you've got AI, you've got blockchain smart contracts, you've got, biotech, all these things that are coming out that'll make things substantially cheaper to produce. I think they've actually front run a huge deflationary collapse with the inflation in the money supply to soften the blow. Because they know when they implement blockchain technology and these instant payment mechanisms, that's immediately going to drive economic growth. And it's going to make things much more efficient so that production happens faster and cheaper. And so those savings can then be passed on to people. But if you had a collapse in prices of goods overnight, there's a lag, right? And people don't think about this. Like, people have got inventory that have a cost of goods associated with them. And if tomorrow everybody could produce those same goods for a third of the price, now they've got all this inventory that they're just screwed on, right? So you have to be able to hold price stability, and you could do that through UBI by printing more money in opposition to the deflationary effect of the new implementation of these technologies, and then at least give, like a 5 or 10 year period where that happened, where people could scale out of these positions that they're in and transfer to a new, and that's what they've done with the debt since '08 too. But anyway, the basic concept is huge deflationary pressures from advances in technology, the UBI and the CBDC, and the capability to print more money in opposition to that could hold price stability while making allocations to people where they could use that in portions of the economy where discrepancies were. So,
yeah, I think that's a really interesting thought. One of the really cool things about AI is you really could kind of have a much more micro version of monetary policy. And I think that's kind of what you were alluding to there. Yeah. I think right now with the boom and bust cycles, and I've never actually thought about this necessarily, but you really do have bankers who are trying to control the entire monetary system through with a sledgehammer, right? I think it's like they just go for these very, very abrupt and harsh ways of controlling the money supply. And I think if we had the ability, like you said, to really use AI to tailor in on the places where it could be a lot more applicable, rather than saying, oh, well, we don't know if inflation right now is being caused by wages. We don't know if it's being caused by prices. We don't know if it's caused by inventory shock because of COVID. Let's just jack up interest rates really high and see if it fixes everything, right? Like, I think what you're proposing is using AI, where if we think the issue is in the supply chain, hey, how do we specifically change supply chain economics in order to see if, hey, that's the issue on inflation, without making it so no one can buy a house, right? Because right now they're trying to get rid of inflation, but in the process, you have people who are not really contributing to inflation being affected. So I think that's a really, really cool use for AI. And I think that's something we really need. And I think you made another very good point there on just making money itself cheaper and making transactions cheaper. I mean, even if you think about something like a card processor and the fees they take out of every single transaction, like, think of the GDP savings we would have, and think of how much faster money would move if it didn't have to go through these intermediaries, and if every dollar could be turned around 100% faster and there wasn't fees on it. I mean, you're talking about a change to the system that affects every single transaction in an exponential way. So I think that's fascinating to think about. And I would agree with you. A lot of this stuff is going to be massively deflationary in the cost savings from just using the system. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to GDP when we do see a lot of these better payment systems implemented, because it's one of the few things that really does touch every single part of the economy.
Yeah, to your point, just the fees on the payments themselves being reduced significantly. So, the Fed has two levers right now, right, or on monetary policy. Interest rates, They can do something with that, and the money supply. They can do something with that, but they really can't control. But like in one layer removed with interest rates, they can control velocity of money, right? But they're not directly controlling velocity of money. With a CBDC, you could technically control directly velocity of money, because if you were doling out, and again, I know people are going to get mad about this, but you don't have to spend it if you don't want to, right? So let's say everybody gets UBI, okay? It expires at the end of the month. They want everybody to stimulate the economy, right? Like the stimulus check, there was a ton of people that just saved that or paid off debt, or there wasn't a whole lot of people that went out and spent it in the way that was a productive. Wow, I say that people got to enjoy it, okay, but ideally, and this is the reason tax laws are the way they are, they incentivize you to spend things in a specific sector of the economy or in a specific way. And so I think if they had issued all that money and it had been used as it was a CBDC, and they said, hey, these are the sections of the economy that you can go spend it on, like let's say local retailers, you could only go spend it at local retailers. You couldn't have paid off debt, and you couldn't have bought anything online with it. Local economies that collapsed and all of the mom and pop shops that went out of business, they'd be around, right? Because the stimmy checks would have only been able to be used in your local economy. So it would have been able to support those people and help them.
And if I could just jump in a quick point there, and like one of the things like I think like is a very good medium would be like it doesn't even necessarily have to be like one or the other, but you could at a given point give like a 30% discount to shopping locally or something like that, right? And just have like a win-win for people, being able to stimulate local business. And even on like local business day or something like that, or some kind of holiday that they throw out there, being able to just throw stimuluses out there, I think that'd be a really cool way to like incentivize certain people. And one of the things like I was advocating before was just making sure you had policies to make sure it doesn't get too dystopian, right? And like they're not able to block transactions and not be able to do all this stuff. And one of my biggest pushbacks to like, hey, because a lot of people say, well, like as soon as you have a CBDC, they'll abuse it. But I don't see the system we have right now as much better than a CBDC. It's just a CBDC, except it's all centralized in their own debit and credit system on the back end. Like we've seen people get debanked. I know when Kanye West was going through his thing, he got debanked. There's no CBDC. He still got debanked. And then we still have the government essentially messing with the monetary supply today. We didn't need a CBDC for that. So as much as I understand that a CBDC, if used in the wrong way, could cause a lot of these issues to be worse or reinvent some of these issues, I don't think they're necessarily going to be creating these issues, because I think they're already in the system. So that's why I'm a big advocate for saying, like, how do we make this new system better than the one that we have today? How do we implement things that we wish we had today and wish the government couldn't do in a new CBDC? And I think there are more people who would be on board with that if it was presented correctly than many people think. A lot of these politicians are ultimately going to leave power and end up in the same place you and I are. So they don't necessarily want a system where the politicians coming in after them can go and control their bank accounts and put freezes on what they want to do. I think in general, a lot of people do want a free system and want a system that is more convenient and works for everyone. And I just think rather than hitting the no, we can't have this, everything about a CBDC is bad, and just start talking about like, hey, what we actually need to have in this system, I think that could lead us down a very good road.
Yeah, I would agree. And the same person has mentioned here, Ripple's working with multiple central banks on CBDCs. We know R3 is as well. And so, Swift, they're gonna move to digital money, right? They're gonna have to, in order to be able to have, T+0 instant settlement for international transactions and remove those frictions. And then, there's just a lot of benefit there. Do you have any? I got lots of questions on my side. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I have a good one. I have a good one I'd like to take here. And before I take this, guys, once again, apologies for the technical difficulties. In the beginning, I have a see-through ghost chair now behind me. Apologies for that. I had to switch to a computer I'm not used to using. But Thank you guys so much for sticking with us in the beginning. And whether you're on my stream or Jake's stream right now, make sure to just drop it a like and a retweet. It's going to help more people who'd be getting here late otherwise see this stream and see me and Jake talking. This was kind of impromptu. Not a lot of people know about it. So if you guys just help out by dropping a like and a retweet, it'd be super, super appreciated. The question I wanted to jump into here was one of my viewers, Defin. He said, wouldn't it be harmful to the dollar if it wasn't being used as an intermediate currency at all? And this is a really good question, Defin. It's something that I don't have a correct answer for. It's really just my theory, but it brings in something called the Triffin dilemma, which I think has always been fascinating to me. The United States dollar, in no doubt, has benefited from being the transactional currency of the world. But the Triffin dilemma is just the idea that being a transactional currency for the entire, or being a transactional currency also has burdens to it as well. And you're forced to have a lot of internal issues with that transactional currency as well as the benefit. And it's the whole idea of analyzing how much does an economy gain versus how much is economy hurt from your currency being that transactional currency. And I think anyone saying one way or the other is just theorizing, because we've never actually seen it not be that transactional vehicle in the modern economy. But I just bring up that point just to say, like, I don't know if we really know if it would necessarily be bad. The obvious speculation and the obvious answer is yes, if they're not buying oil in dollars, if they're not doing all this stuff with dollars, that would be bad. But I think there is a little speculation on, hey, what happens if we don't need the dollar as that intermediate currency? Jake, I would love to know what you have to say about that.
Yeah, so Triffin dilemma for me is what you do that's good for your country ends up being bad for the rest of the world, and what you do that's good for the rest of the world ends up being bad for your country, right? So interest rates as an example. We raise interest rates here, awesome. Our currency is stronger in comparison to the rest of the world's currency, but the rest of the world needs dollars to operate. And so now it's more expensive for them to buy dollars or trade their goods to us, and so it hurts their economies. We lower interest rates, awesome. Now our currency is weaker in comparison to other global currencies, but we can borrow more money here. Money's cheaper, right? And it's literally cheaper for the rest of the world also. So as a global reserve currency, and you have an obligation to, like, people get mad about Ukraine and a lot of these other jurisdictions and us sending dollars over there. Kind of have an obligation to do some of that stuff, right? Like, if they don't have our dollars, then they... And I'm not saying it's not excessive what we're doing in Ukraine. I think it's ridiculous. But aside from that, we do have a slight obligation. And so you have to support other people. We also end up in international affairs. We end up in wars. We end up in all these other things. We're able to export our inflation, right? So what normally would be horrible here, we can just sell those dollars off into foreign hands, and they get the inflated dollars. That get to circulate in their economy, and they stay away from here. It's bad when that comes back. So that'll be on the backside of this deal. What's the inflation going to look like when all those dollars come home to roost? Hopefully we've got stablecoin regulations, and everybody's got high demand for those dollars, and they've got to back their stablecoins 1-to-1 with those treasuries and bonds and dollars that come flooding back to the U.S. And I think maybe some of that's pre-planned, but what I'm looking most forward to is, one, the economic growth that it's going to have. People don't think about it that way. They think, that'd be horrible. And I think it can be done in a way where, so like Trump wants to levy tariffs against international trade. And people are like, oh, it's horrible. Well, prior to 1913 and the income tax, that's literally how the U.S. government made its money. Prior to the 16th Amendment being ratified in, and the income tax being, imposable by Congress, we made our money on imports. That's how we funded our government. So if we wanted to go back to something like that before the Federal Reserve in 1913, it's what you would do. And then that would also incentivize all of these companies that have offshored their manufacturing, because that's another symptom of Triffin's dilemma is you hollow out all of your manufacturing. We used to be the world's largest creditor nation. Now we're the world's largest debtor nation, right? And we used to produce everything before we got the global reserve currency in 1944. Everything was made here in the U.S. because it was American made, right? And our economy was booming, and we had all the gold, and we had all these good things, and then we became the global reserve currency, and everybody offshored everything because it was cheaper to produce it over there. And now we have a global economy, so it's a very different world than it was in the in the early 1900s. But I think incentivizing those companies to move things back here, implementing a lot of these technologies for them to be able to produce goods cheaper here domestically in the U.S. I'm not saying it's going to drive a ton of jobs, right? Because they're going to have to augment the way that they produce things here in order to be able to meet costs and keep price stability and make sure that they still have consumers. But I think it'll drive GDP, right? So overall, I think it'll end up actually being a really good thing. I just think the way that it has to be done is kind of it's a dance, and if you lean too far one direction or the other, or pull the trigger too soon on one thing or the other, again, everything has a lag, and so you just have to keep that in mind when you're making a transition.
I also think it's one of the things is like as we kind of move into a more advanced world and as other countries have more advanced economies, I don't think it necessarily makes sense for them to be relying on the US dollar. I mean, you get to a certain point as a country where you want to have your own sovereign currency, and to be relying on the United States for things like we talked about earlier, like monetary policy, when your own country might be in a completely different scenario. Stuff like that really doesn't make sense. And as we go into a more developed world, I think each nation is going to want more independence from relying on someone like the United States. And one of the first things that's obviously most important for any nation is its own internal currency. I think we're moving into a world where we're actually going to have a lot more countries have their own currency and depend more on that currency. And as we create payment systems that operate without the need for using one single currency, like a lot of our payment systems operate today, I think it's going to be a lot easier for countries to source liquidity without having to adopt things like the dollar for their primary transactional vehicle. So if there was a way for a lot of these smaller nations to make their currencies more liquid, to be able to use them more easily on an international setting, maybe by using a bridge currency, then I think it would be a lot more realistic for some of these nations to have their own in-house currencies. I think essentially one of the biggest things is they just haven't had access to markets in the same exact way with their currency. I think stuff like blockchain technology, bridge assets, neutral liquidity assets are going to change that in a big way. And I think that's why right now you see a lot of the smaller countries, right, adopting CBDCs at a faster rate. I think that's why you see a lot of Ripple's partnerships with some smaller nations. They're the countries and nations that really benefit the most from making this switch, and therefore they're going to be the first one to jump on the train.
Yeah. Well, I think, David Schwartz has talked about that, going around to all the kind of smaller intermediary banks and aggregating all of those as a force against the larger ones. Probably same thing with the countries, right? BRICS they just announced another like 42 or 45 nations that plan on, aligning with BRICS Plus, basically in opposition to the U.S. So there was a question here that I wanted to address real quick before we go on to the next one. Jason's asked, how much is the Beyond Broke Mastermind? So for y'all that don't know, we do have a private community. Mikkel is in there often, and we have a lot of these discussions a couple times a week. We do give the members there access to private investments. We run deals for Ripple and a few other investments within that community, and people that are not accredited can participate on those deals by being in the community. So costs are pretty low. We try to make it reasonable for anybody. $25 a month for a social membership, and then to be able to participate on the deals is Carbon One, which is $100 a month. So I know Mikkel's in on a couple cap tables also. Yep.
Yeah, no, actually, that's how me and Jake really met, because we were doing these live streams in the early days, and I joined the group just organically, wanting to see what he had going on over there, and obviously things built out a lot since then. But it's been a fantastic experience, and it's really cool just to give people access to things that they want and that they can't get anywhere else. I think that's one of the best things about the group. It's very differentiated, and like you actually get access to stuff that you would have never had access to before. And then obviously, I know one of the biggest things I hear personally from people who have joined the group recently is just the ability to have conversations with people in that setting that they don't have in their daily lives. I can't tell you how many people I talk to who say, oh yeah, I'm literally the only person I know who knows anything about this cryptocurrency stuff. And I think what I found is like you surround yourself with more like-minded people, you end up learning so much more, and just being able to bounce ideas off people and talk with people about a lot of this stuff. It really helps you build out your own theses and learn more about stuff that maybe you didn't know about before, you've never heard anyone explain. So it's a really cool way to just surround yourself with like-minded individuals.
Yeah, well, that's the point of a mastermind, right? So I've been part of multiple other groups, paid a lot of money to be in those circles and get around other professionals and high-level people, and that's really what's allowed me to garner the knowledge and expertise around macroeconomics and taxes and estate planning and a lot of the stuff that I deal with today. I didn't know about 5 years ago, right? I had no clue. But I paid more money than I was comfortable with to get into rooms that I wasn't supposed to be in or didn't feel like I was supposed to be in at the time. And you don't, like, there's been a couple instances that I think back on where I'm like, in the moment, it didn't seem that like big, but later on, the conversations that I had there instilled certain traits, values, or beliefs in me that allowed me to get something later on. So you have any questions over there on your side?
I got one more I'd like to hit, and yeah. I'm gonna, Roger, I'm gonna spin your question a little bit just so you know, just because we're gonna make this a little more viewer friendly. How do you think going into 2025 and a change in a regime in the SEC, possibly the president, do you think we are at do you think we've seen the worst in terms of hostile attacks on the cryptocurrency industry? Do you think that's behind us, or do you think there's possibility for more to come?
You never know with tax law, right? They change every year. They put new provisions in there. They pivot on things. They renege on some things that they said that they were going to do that they don't do now. So I have no way of knowing if there's going to be a specific tax imposed on digital assets, if they're going to be given a completely separate designation of any other asset and have their own tax code associated with them.
What about things like Operation like Choke Point 2.0 and like a lot of the regulation by enforcement, though? Do you think we're past the worst of it, or do you think it gets worse?
Yeah, I think we've seen some pretty substantial things come out of Congress over the last couple months here, overturning some things. People are aware that the SEC has overstepped their bounds, and judges have levied fines against them, because of some of the things that they've done in cases. They've put in, basically lied and perjury and like did a bunch of stuff that they shouldn't have in certain situations. A lot of stuff in their closet has kind of been aired out during the Ripple case with, previous people that were at the SEC and maybe some backdoor deals that were had with them. I don't know if there'll actually be real ramifications for that, but I think it's done a lot to make the public aware that some of this stuff was going on. So yeah. I think that there has to be reform and change in some manner, and there does need to be some type of consequences for the actions that have been taken. I think Gary would probably do well at this point just to be like, I'm stepping out, guys. I'll see y'all later, and then ride off into the sunset with his ex-wife's retirement account and be like, done, But yeah, I think that.
Well, that's what he did at the CFTC before, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you make a lot of very interesting points, and the one thing I always tell people that I was shocked about was like seeing how bad things were after FTX and Terra Luna, and to have a BTC ETF like 6 months later. Like, I thought we were going to be in like
Years from
a crypto nuclear scenario, like fallout, like we couldn't talk about this kind of stuff, like institutions wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and they totally use that as an opportunity to play catch up and like say, okay, we've been really lagging behind. This is a dip we have to step into in a big way and really start embracing this. And for me, that just showed like, look, there was like a lot of damage done during that time period. There was a lot of damage done with the Ripple
well,
SEC case, but like it got cleaned up faster than I would have ever expected.
I think you need that though, right? You need catalysts for stuff, especially if you do want reform in an industry and it to be brought into the financial system. Like, let's just say we'd sailed along and Luna was still ticking along and FTX was still good and none of that ever happened. Okay. I don't think we would have anywhere near the institutional buy-in that we have today. And I don't think we would be anywhere as close as we are to regulation in the space because there wouldn't be a need, right? There wouldn't have been a catalyst. So were those things orchestrated? Maybe, again, the SEC did meet with FTX multiple times. But they've also met with Ripple multiple times before they sued them. Consensus the same way. People want to do good. People come in, they want to talk to the SEC. We're regulated by them with digital wealth partners. We try to make sure that everything that we do, is in alignment as much as possible above whatever the requirements would have been, right? So I think people, they just don't know where the bar is. And so there are obviously bad actors, right? There's a lot of people that are scammers in this space. There are people that launch tokens, pump and dump them, and there's no recourse, right? And that'll probably continue until there is recourse on this space. And I think that that'll be a good thing. I think that institutional custody is a good thing. I think that insurance on your assets, having recourse if something happens is a good thing.
Why don't you tell people real quick a little bit about institutional custody, because it's something that I think a lot of people watching here could benefit massively from, and it's something not a lot of people know about. Just to give you guys a quick background, and I'll let Jake take it away. One of the biggest things we're told kind of when we get into crypto is like, hey, you need to offload all your assets into this $45 ledger that you get from Amazon, and then you have to like hide it under your bed or whatever. And, I found more often than not when I have conversations with people with significant amounts of wealth, they just kind of look at me like with a confused look on their face when I tell them that's something they have to do. So, and I think me and Jake both see this industry going somewhere very different over the next 5 years. So, Jake, what are some of the advantages of having institutional grade custody, and who do you think like really needs it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you've got less than maybe $100,000 invested in crypto, which could be a significant amount of money for you. So really, I would say this: if you have a significant amount of money invested in crypto to you, having it in an account with recourse and insurance that is absolutely secure with multiple signatures is probably a good idea. And you're not going to get that with a cold wallet, right? With a cold wallet, you're going to send it off the exchange and hope it gets to your wallet first time. I don't know if you've ever sent a couple $100,000 on a transaction before, Mikkel, but it's not fun when it doesn't land immediately, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever sent a Bitcoin transaction for that much and you're like, did you get it yet? Like you're asking the other person.
Every single time I move Bitcoin and then XRP, it's like a big reminder of like, it's night and day. It's night and day. It's shocking. It is.
So, but anyway, like you move it, and a lot of the people that we deal with and have conversations with that do have significant amounts of digital assets, they just left it on the exchange.
Yeah.
They never moved it to a cold wallet. And I have one client, multiple clients, but one in particular that comes to mind that was had for about $600,000. They called him up and coerced him, and he just sent it off there and never showed up in his cold wallet. So anyway, don't ever give anybody your keys. But let's say you do send it to your cold wallet, you write it down on a piece of paper. Cool. What if you lose it, or your house burns down, or your dog tears it up, or whatever? And people have these art plates and other stuff now. Cool, great. When I had cold wallets, and I wanted the institutional custody for myself. A lot of what we've built over here at Digital Wealth Partners and Digital Ascension Group has been self-oriented, and then we're able to provide that to other people also. So I had 12 wallets, 12 different seed phrases that I had to keep track of. All of those were written down on 3 separate pieces of paper that were held in multiple locations, so that if something happened, my wife, who knows nothing about crypto, could possibly do something with them.
Possibly do something. I love that.
Right. Like, just completely inefficient. So institutional custody, it's a tri-party agreement is really what it is. So you have a wealth manager or custodial partner, and they are a signer on that. And so they're very unlikely to be in a vehicle or a craft with you if you were to perish, right? So God forbid, you and your spouse are in the same vehicle, and you have an accident or something, you're both signers on the account. Now there's no way to get to it, right? So even if you had a multi-sig wallet where you had some type of recourse, most of the time people are going to pick their spouse or somebody close to them that they could be in a vehicle with. So we're completely separate of that. You've also got the institution that provides the custodial environment. So we go bankrupt, you're still on there. You can add another trust bank or another custodian can step in and be the ulterior signer. You can remove us from the account at some point. You'd have to migrate it, but it can be done within the institutional custody. And then you have beneficiaries attached to that account. You have other trustees that would step in and manage those assets if you were to pass away. If you do have a trust, an asset protection trust, which is what we recommend for the majority of our clients, either internationally or domestic here to the U.S., you're going to have a distribution trustee. And the way that was orchestrated before was you have your assets on that cold wallet, you have a piece of paper that has the keys on it, you just cut that bad boy in half and hand them half the page, and then delete your cold wallet off of your stuff so that you can't get to it. That's not a good solution.
No.
Right? So,
no.
Or you got a paper wallet and they have half your keys. Anyway, so the way that this stuff has been done up until institutional custody existed, it's been very crude and not so great. But now that we have this, we have partners. We have Archax and Anchorage. We were originally partnered with Standard Custody and Trust before Ripple made that acquisition. And so we're able to provide our clients institutional custody. It's 3-factor authentication. So you'll have a physical YubiKey, a password, and another method of authenticating yourself to sign a transaction. And you're able to remove your assets at any time. You just message us if you need to.
And something people don't talk about too is David Schwartz specifically said that he believes the strongest form of any kind of security is multi-signature security. And the reason for that is, and no one really thinks about this, is if you're the only signer on your ledger, well, Ledger leaked everyone's addresses at one point, and all you need is someone to come to your personal address and force you to do anything with that one signature. Part of having a trusted person on the account also as a signer is to simply say, hey, this person wants to withdraw every single cryptocurrency they own from this platform all at once without having a prior conversation. That sounds really suspicious. Maybe let's do a follow-up call and make sure this is something someone actually wants to do. So I think that's something that people really overlook in this space. It's very obvious to tell typically when you have a transaction that's really out of the norm and might require, hey, are you sure you want to do this? And I think a lot of people forget that if you're the only signer on a device that you're holding in your personal custody, that could create issues on itself. So it's all about removing as much risk as possible, getting rid of as many centralized points as possible. And that's why David Schwartz himself has said that, hey, multi-signature is by far the best way to go if you're looking to protect the large sums of money.
Well, and it also mitigates your tax implications, right? So this is something that, may not have thought of, but the IRS determines when you're taxed on airdrops or staking rewards based on control and domain. Okay, so you have to have both of those things in order to have the tax implications. If you have a multi-sig wallet held with a custodian and there's other signers on that, you don't have control or domain of those distributions. at that point when they're received to the wallet. And so therefore, that's not taxable income. So that's another thing we provide for our clients. If you do have assets held with us and they're staked or delegated proof of stake, or they're used to produce yield, and that yield comes back to the wallet that's held with us, no tax implications until you actually remove that and it's in your full control.
It's so funny. I talk with people all the time about like the advantages of institutional grade custody, and I will say, it's one of the easiest things to have a conversation with people about, because like you say the word institutional grade custody with insurance and they're like, I'm in. And it's like, well, I have 15 other reasons why I want to tell you why you're going to want this. It's like, no, I'm in, like, I already want it. So yeah. It's things like that you just said. Like, I forget to even tell people half the time because there's so many benefits from getting into institutional grade custody. And it makes it even easier with how bad the current methods in the market are right now. So it's like, not only is this method like really good in its own right, but the fact that it's being compared against like holding your assets on Coinbase. And I just had one of my favorite viewers here, Roger, just said that he was trying to remove assets from Coinbase just to put them in self-custody. And he's had them frozen for like weeks, like days to weeks. And it's just like, why? These are the issues, right? And then let me tell you right now, if you want to go back from that ledger back to Coinbase, it's not going to be any easier. I've heard of people having their assets frozen for 4 to 5 days just trying to sell some. So there's really no good solution right now in terms of retail style custody. And I think that's why we instantly just started looking at some of these institutional grade products and saying, hey, how can we offer these to people who are demanding that they have better services in this industry?
Yeah. So I just want to give people some qualifications around that, just so that they're aware if they do approach us for it. So we do deal with people that have more than 100,000 in assets that they want to custody with us. We can provide custody for XRP, XLM, HBAR, Algorand, Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDC, Quant, I believe, through Anchorage, AVAX, Matic, Solana, Chainlink, and then a bunch of DeFi protocols as well. So ERC20 tokens are kind of the mainstay for a lot of these custodians because that's where the liquidity is. So if you're in those ecosystems with a large amount of money, then we can help you secure that and make sure that it's insured and it's not going to be taken from you and it's in a good spot. Let's see here. I know you got a hard stop here in like 5 minutes, so I want to be respectful of your time, Connor.
Yeah, we can go like 10 minutes over. I know we had some trouble getting this thing started. I wanted to do this. Why did you stop with standard custody when Ripple bought them? It's not necessarily that we stopped with them. It's just that Ripple already had another custody solution. So Ripple bought Medico, if you remember, and then standard custody. And I mean, they're really just combining them together. They're using the trust from standard custody, and they're using a lot of the custody parts of Medico. So, I mean, when you're a business like Ripple and you buy two custody solutions and you combine them, it's not necessarily that we stopped using standard custody.
It is. So they kind of forced us out. So they're going to use standard custody and those licenses that they acquired there in New York as their treasury for XRP and also Real USD. So they're pivoting away from any consumer-facing accounts or wealth management accounts, which is what we had, and we were their only one, right? So they're like, all right, is the infrastructure that's here and the staff and all of these other things that would be required for overhead to support this account worth it? Yes, no. They decided no, and they want to help promote our checks and their growth of that custodian. And they use Medico as their infrastructure already. So it's a seamless transition. The team there has been fantastic. And they're going to help us migrate current clients from standard custody over there with no issues. Details on that should come out middle of next week is kind of the expectation there. Timeline, 60 to 90 days. No rush, no interruptions in service, no problems. We want to make sure that this is as smooth and easy a process as we can for all of our clients that do hold assets with us. And again, so some of the benefits, they actually get a step up in the amount of insurance that they had. So at standard custody, it was $50 million per vault. So that's the other thing about institutional custody. So like, send your assets to Coinbase. If it's XRP, you get that tag number. You send it to their wallet. They owe it back to you, and that's your account number where they know how much they owe you, right? With our custody service, you get segregated vaults. It's your literal own wallet address on the XRPL that's held in the vault. And so, you know, you don't ever have to worry about commingled assets or it being rehypothecated or encumbered or being owed back to you. You physically can look it up on XRP Scan or whatever blockchain it's on. But anyway, you get the step up in the amount of insurance. So it goes from 50 to 100 million per vault. And then also we got the addition of XLM, HBAR, Algorand, and they also have a tie-in with Fireblocks. So we should be able to work with them to hold XDC and Flare as well. Yep. So a much larger breadth of assets than what we had at Standard Custody.
And one of the cool things too is just being able to work with these people. They know we have a lot of clients. They want to be able to support our clients, and if we have a lot of clients who are all looking for something similar, we actually have the ability to push on them to hopefully, over the long run, provide services that we're going to want. So it's kind of part of the cool thing about me and Jake being in a similar community and bringing in a lot of people who all have similar interests. I know a lot of us probably are looking for similar things with our own digital assets, and being able to kind of bring people together and have a louder voice and be able to push on some of these custodians to make things happen we're going to want is a really cool part of this. And like Jake said, they've been fantastic in working with us. It's been really exciting, and I think we're going to build out some really cool things in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Zoomed Out has asked a good question here that I wanted to address. He said, trust lines, are they safe or could they be exploited? Love my cold storage, but linking it to something else seems risky to me. Thanks for the channel. Thank you for watching and asking a good question. Trust lines are exactly what they indicate, that you trust the other party. So they do expose you in a certain manner. The outside key is exposed to the other party in both of whoever you're dealing with. And so if they can figure out your private key, then they've already got one of them. You know,
I got a couple of thoughts on this too. So
if you trust people that you're dealing with, and I think this is a really good feature of the XRPL in particular, because there are going to be certain circumstances, like, you know, let's say your son or your child has a bank account at the same bank as you. You might set up a connection with their account to be able to pass them money easily, right? And they might be able to view your accounts and see what you have in there. And that's kind of like a trust line, right? So you still have this layer there, but you're a lot closer. It's not like another account at the bank that can't see anything associated with your stuff. So just be leery of that. I wouldn't just set up trust lines willy-nilly. But if you're getting an airdrop, what I've done, and I'm not, you know, this is just me, not making recommendations for anybody. That's Mikkel's job. Is I set up the trust line, I get the airdrop, and then I cut the trust line, and then I've gone and sold those assets for more XRP. But that's just me. So.
Yeah, me personally, I think a cold wallet should be something have as little activity with as possible. It's about getting an airdrop, setting up a trust line. Just set up a new wallet and set up the trust line and get the airdrop. Like, very rarely do you have to be exposing substantial accounts with substantial amount of value to outside counterparties or outside protocols. So, you know, like a cold wallet's supposed to be a cold wallet. Your ledger or whatever shouldn't be hooked up to 45 different DeFi protocols with anonymous founders. Like, that's not the purpose of a cold wallet. That's the purpose of a hot wallet. I say this all the time, but like, there's advantages and disadvantages to every single solution out there. Like, there's advantages to centralized exchanges. Whether everyone has a million problems with a centralized exchange, there is the advantage of there's direct liquidity right there, and it's easy and anyone can figure it out. Now, there's advantages to a hot wallet as well. You can do a whole bunch of connections. There's usually a nice user interface. But just make sure you're not using the wrong product trying to achieve the wrong goal. So, like, storing a large amount of value on a centralized exchange, right? That's not using the exchange necessarily for its liquidity. That's turning a centralized exchange into what should be being used for a cold wallet. For a cold wallet, don't hook up your cold wallet to a million different DeFi protocols. That's what a hot wallet's for. So just be careful of what you're using each solution for. Make sure you're using it for the right thing. And one of the things you don't necessarily want to be doing with a cold wallet is exposing it to a whole bunch of different people who potentially could use your public phrase to try to, who knows, send you spams that might get you to click on something, whether it's send you a very convincing phishing email that includes assets in your portfolio so it looks really real. Who knows how they go about it? I've heard of everything under the sun. Just be ultra, ultra careful with your cold storage.
Yeah. Well, and again, if it's held in institutional custody,
yeah,
you don't have to worry about all that.
Exactly. Another advantage of institutional grade custody, which is where I think, Jake, you and I both think the majority of people with substantial value end up over the long run. And I think kind of in the early days, I think a lot of people in here end up with substantial value.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that a lot of these assets are going to appreciate substantially over the next 3 to 5 years, and a lot of people are going to hold significant amounts of wealth that they may not be used to. More money, more problems is a real thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I got to figure out a better, well, you know what, actually my estate planner gave me a little bit better correlation than what I have been using. I have been using the dog chasing the car, but my estate planner is not handy. Okay. And he said, most people looking to acquire wealth are like, using a power tool that they're not used to using, they're not proficient with, right? It gets the job done. Like, let's say you know how to do about 80% of it, but the last 20% you cut your leg off. Probably wasn't a great experience, right? Or you're the dog again chasing the car, but once you get the car, like, how do you drive it? How do you use it? How do you not run yourself over? And there's a reason that BNY Mellon holds, what is it, like 67 trillion in assets and assets under custody, because people want recourse, people want insurance, people want stability, people want a counterparty to hold their assets and make sure that it's in the best custody possible out of their possession, so that if they are attacked by a creditor or a robber or somebody else, their assets aren't exposed and their loved ones still get taken care of. So I want to give a shout out to Peaky Blinders here on the super chat. He says, two of the greatest, only a handful of it out here. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you, brother. Well, we got 2 more minutes here with Mikkel, so I'll go ahead and let you finish it off, Mikkel. If you've got anything you want to share with people, any place that they can go find you, meet with you.
First of all, anyone just looking kind of for more interaction casually with Jake and myself, or looking to get involved in the private deals we will run, maybe on Ripple Equity if you're not accredited, or you're just looking for a group of like-minded individuals you can bounce ideas off of, the best place for that is the mastermind group. If you go to my X page, you can get a free month. It's Mikkel1MO. So no risk. You just join the group, see if you like it, try it out. And then if you don't, you just leave. So no risk to you. Go check it out. I've heard great responses from people so far who've gotten in. They've loved it. And then other than that, obviously just Mikkel XRP on X. And then most importantly, if you heard me and Jake talking about the institutional grade custody, if you want to get your estate in order, if you want to start focusing on, hey, how do I hold my assets in an LLC to remove liability of myself away from my assets, all those kinds of things, digitalwealthpartners.net. That's digitalwealthpartners.net. Upper right-hand corner, contact us. You can get a consultation. We'll be able to talk about your situation, talk you through the steps. And guys, I've had plenty of people reach out and just say, hey, my assets are here right now. I don't yet qualify for institutional grade custody, but I'm going to be accumulating heavy over this next cycle. I want to get my LLC set up now so I'm ready for when that happens. Look, it never hurts to be prepared. Obviously, institutional grade custody starts at 100K, but I always tell people, being someone who's always planning ahead, trying to stay on top of this stuff, that's never going to hurt you. So keep that in mind, and really excited to hear from some of you. And Jake, it's been great getting to talk to you tonight. This was awesome. Apologies to everyone for the technical difficulties in the beginning. We got it working, so that's awesome. And yeah.
Awesome, brother. Yeah. Definitely recommend people reaching out to Mikkel, work with him on the wealth management side. He is licensed as a financial advisor. We're putting together. So there's one last question down here at the bottom that I want to touch on before we go. And he asks, in institutional custody, should the yield reap profit even after fees, even taking into consideration eventually being taxed on the yield? Can you explain the benefit there? So, Rob, we work with a bunch of institutional partners to be able to provide leverage against your assets. So anytime you borrow against your assets, that's not income. It's not taxable. And then you can take that liquidity and put it into other things that you can depreciate against the income that they produce. So real estate, insurance policies. That's the other reason that we prefer that our clients, and actually require that our clients hold their assets in a vehicle, either a trust or an LLC, is so that we can use the full breadth of the tax code to be able to offset the yield that they will be receiving, right, with working with us with their assets. So, and the fees are super low. So there is an onboarding fee of $1,000, but beyond that, it's just 2 basis points a month. So for every $100,000 in the account, that's $20. So if we have the assets earning 1%, 2%, it far exceeds the cost of custody when you work with us. So I think that's going to be it for tonight. As always, appreciate you guys. We'll continue to do these. We'll be back on our normal schedule next week of Monday, Wednesday. So look forward to seeing you guys then. And Mikkel, do you have like a set schedule of when you go live? Do you have certain times, or is it just kind of ad hoc?
Oh, it's pretty much, I try to do it 12 Eastern every weekday. I miss a day here once in a while, but it's a lot of Q&A, just going over what's going on in the market, market update in the afternoon. So would love to see some of you over there. And yeah, obviously I'm going to try to come on more of these more often as well, because it's always a ton of fun getting to get new questions, getting to talk with Jake and get some different perspective on a lot of this stuff. I think it always goes better when you can have two people kind of talking about a lot of this stuff in the market. Gives a nice flow to the conversation, and this has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely, brother. Well, again, appreciate you coming on, and we will see you guys on the next one.
Yep, have a great night.